There are moments in the Bible where I feel the wind changes direction, as if the very sky holds its breath to reveal something that can completely transform the way we live. When Jesus climbed that hill in Galilee, I imagined the dust rising at his feet as each step carried a silence full of promise. It seemed like an ordinary mountain, but something there shone with the strength of an ancient secret that would finally be revealed. Whenever I close my eyes and think of that scene, I feel as if I am climbing alongside him, feeling the warm sun on my back and my heart restless for a revelation I cannot yet name. Every face in the crowd carried questions, pains, expectations, and inner worlds that only God knew deeply. And Jesus, with a calmness that disarmed any resistance, prepared to open a path that no one ever imagined existed. Something inside me whispers that if I understand what he taught there, my own story will also change profoundly. Because Matthew 6 doesn't just inform, it awakens. It ignites something that was dormant. It inaugurates a completely new way of being before God. I imagine the scene as Jesus sits down to teach, the breeze sweeping through the valley, carrying the scent of olive trees, the murmur of the crowd fading until it becomes only an expectant silence. There were Roman soldiers in the distance, shadows of the oppression that everyone felt, but no one dared to challenge. There were Pharisees nearby, observing everything with eyes trained to defend the appearance of religion, not the essence of faith. And there were simple people like you and me, trying to survive amidst overwhelming expectations and silent dreams. There, in that seemingly ordinary place, Jesus began to reveal a kingdom that did not depend on luxurious temples, nor on public applause, nor on a spirituality displayed like a medal. A kingdom that began in the invisible, in the places no one sees, in the gestures no one celebrates. Whenever I reread this moment, I feel as if he is looking directly at me, inviting me to something my heart has always desired but never known how to explain. There is a hidden key here, and each of his words begins to slowly turn it within my soul. As he watched religious leaders turn faith into a spectacle, I realize how much this resonates within us even today. How many times have I tried to prove something to God that he never asked for? How many times have I cared more about the gaze of others than the voice of the Father? Back then, the Pharisees raised their hands to be seen. Today, many of us raise masks to be accepted. Religiosity creates a stage, but Jesus always acts behind the scenes of the heart. He saw an exhausted people measuring their worth by external approval, living worn down by the anxiety of not being enough. And almost unexpectedly, he didn't begin by denouncing sin, but by exposing the spiritual loneliness hidden behind all performance. He knew that the human soul only finds rest when it doesn't need to be seen to be loved. There is something profoundly liberating when I realize that Jesus didn't come to perfect our religious performance. He came to liberate us from it. And it is precisely in this liberation that the secret life with God is born. Whenever I think of Matthew 6, I feel like I'm standing before an old wooden door, marked by time, but shining from within with a light I don't yet fully understand. Jesus begins to speak of the secret as if revealing the hidden architecture of the kingdom. A place where the Father meets me without an audience, without masks, without fear of comparison. A place where my soul breathes without needing to prove anything. And as he described this invisible dynamic, something within me stirred, an ancient awareness, as if I were being reminded of who I was always called to be. I realize that what he proposes is not a change in behavior, but in spiritual territory, leaving the public stage of anxiety and entering the silence where God whispers identity. With each line I read, I feel as if he is removing dust from a mirror, allowing me to see my heart with more honesty and depth. And the clearer everything becomes, the more I realize that there is something even deeper coming next. Something that can completely redefine my faith. But before I delve into that secret place, Jesus seems to create a necessary tension. He exposes the contrast between the human stage and the hidden place of the Father. He speaks of ostentatious giving, performative prayers, dramatized fasts, and I realize that in each of these acts, there was more loneliness than devotion. And I also realize how much modern anxiety is born from precisely the same place. The desperate attempt to control perceptions, guarantee approval, and manipulate security. Jesus is about to show a path to healing that doesn't depend on the exterior, but on the interior. A route that doesn't begin with what I do, but with what I allow Him to see. There is a truth here that touches a universal pain, the fear of not being enough. And in exposing it, Jesus doesn't condemn, He prepares the ground, because only when the illusion falls can the heart finally be reached. And so, even before Jesus teaches how to pray, He teaches where to pray. Before showing words, He shows the place. Before offering answers, He reveals the environment where the soul is rebuilt. This movement is so symbolic that it seems almost architectural. He is building a new way of living the faith, and the foundation is the presence of the Father, who sees in secret. I feel as if Jesus is calling me to a territory where fear loses its voice, where anxiety slowly dissolves, where identity does not depend on witnesses. There is something powerful happening between the lines, something that awakens the feeling that I am on the verge of a revelation that can reposition my spiritual life. It's as if the whole mountain is holding its breath, waiting for the moment when He will open the door to the invisible and invite me to enter. And now that I am before this threshold, I realize that the most important question is not about what is there, but whether I am willing to cross it. What always impresses me is imagining Jesus silently observing everything happening around Him before speaking a word. He saw the haste of those trying to prove their spirituality, the pride hidden behind grand gestures, the fear behind religious masks. And the more I think about it, the more I realize He wasn't just seeing a distorted practice. He was seeing desperate souls trying to fill a void that had never been healed. There's an emotional weight to this that deeply confronts me, because I realize I often do the same. Trying to appear strong, trying to appear confident, trying to appear spiritual. But Jesus isn't impressed by facades. He looks deeply, as if piercing through layers I didn't even know existed. There's an honesty in His gaze that disarms any attempt at pretense, but at the same time brings a strange peace, as if He were saying, I know who you are behind all this, and you're the one I want. This realization opens a vulnerable space within me where truth begins to breathe. When Jesus describes the Pharisees giving alms with trumpeters leading the way, I can almost hear the metallic echo of that trumpet cutting through the hot air of the Jerusalem streets. It was more than noise, it was amplified vanity. They transformed the pain of others into an opportunity for display. And as I observe this scene with the eyes of my imagination, I realize how easily the human heart confuses generosity with self-promotion. It's not so far from our reality. Today, what is often called altruism still carries the hidden intention of being noticed, validated, admired. Jesus saw all this with a clarity that must have been disturbing for those who lived by appearances. But deep inside, there is something liberating when He exposes this contrast. Because He doesn't condemn generosity, He restores the motive. He returns the act to its original place, not a performance, but a loving response to the Father who already sees the invisible. And when this truth begins to reveal itself, I realize that the secret is not the absence of witnesses, but the presence of the only gaze that matters. The image of public prayers touches me even more deeply. I imagine men standing at intersections, arms outstretched, long speeches, calculated gestures. The crowd passed by, some impressed, others indifferent, and in the midst of that spiritual noise, Jesus saw something no one else saw, a disconnected heart. It wasn't prayer, it was theater. And every time I think about it, I feel how much it reveals parts of my own journey. Moments when my words were many, but my heart was absent. Moments when I said beautiful things, but feared the silence where the truth appears. What Jesus reveals is almost surgical. It's not the volume of the voice that touches heaven, but the vulnerability of the hidden heart. And the more I understand this, the more I feel that he is not just correcting a habit. He is calling me to a reunion with the Father. There is a secret invitation here, as if he were opening space within my inner chaos so that I can finally speak to God for real, without internal or external audiences. The scene of public fasting is equally revealing. The leaders walked the streets with downcast faces, torn clothes, expressions carefully crafted to communicate suffering. It was as if they were transforming spiritual discipline into personal propaganda. And Jesus, observing this, saw something even deeper. The hunger was not of the body, it was for recognition. This type of fasting did not bring anyone closer to God, it only brought them closer to their own image. And when I realize this, I feel something stir within me. How many times have my renunciations been merely attempts to prove a value that God never asked me to demonstrate? How many times have I confused spirituality with theatrical self-sacrifice? Jesus' voice here is firm, but full of tenderness. He is not invalidating fasting, he is saving it. He is rescuing the place where true hunger is born, not in the stomach, but in the soul that desires the presence of the Father. This revelation opens a silent, almost imperceptible but life-filled path, the path where discipline ceases to be a burden and becomes communion. And then Jesus does something that still baffles me to this day. He tells us to wash our faces, apply oil, look good, precisely at the moment we are fasting. This profoundly challenges human logic, because fasting, in the eyes of many, should be visible, almost dramatic. But Jesus reverses everything. He teaches that what is between me and God should remain between me and God, not as a forced secret, but as a protected treasure. There is something extremely therapeutic in this, as if he were teaching me to build an inner space that no one can violate. A place where my story with the Father doesn't need spectators to be real. And I realize that within this guidance, he is delivering a rare freedom. The freedom to live a faith that no one needs to validate. A faith that doesn't depend on the applause of others, nor on comparison with anyone. A faith that flourishes in silence because it is there that the heart begins to beat again to the rhythm of the eternal. Each time I meditate on these three practices, giving, praying, and fasting, I feel Jesus dismantling, layer by layer, everything I've learned about performance-based spirituality. He's revealing that the greatest enemy of the spiritual life isn't human weakness, but the desperate need to appear strong. And when that mask falls, something extraordinary happens. The heart begins to be reached in a new way. There's a preparation here, almost like lighting a lamp before the greater revelation to come. Jesus is leading me into emotional territory where I can finally breathe without fear of failing before God. And the more I walk with him on this mountain, the more I realize there's something even deeper waiting to be revealed, something capable of answering the most hidden anxieties of my soul. There's something fascinating about how Jesus doesn't begin with formulas, but with a place. He doesn't say, when you pray, use these words, but when you pray, go into your room and close the door. Whenever I imagine this scene, I feel the weight of the spiritual transition he is creating. Crowds listen to long prayers in bustling squares, but now Jesus is pointing to a small, quiet, hidden space. The room in that culture was almost always a storage room, small, dark, windowless, with nothing to draw attention. And it is there that he places the encounter with God. The invisible becomes the stage for the eternal. And when I think about it, I realize that the promise is not about the format of the prayer, but about the environment where the soul finally stops acting. In the closed room, there is no audience, no comparison, no anxiety of performance. It is the safest place to be true. And this simplicity is so profound that it seems to carry a secret that is only revealed when we accept this silence. What touches me most about this calling is that Jesus isn't creating a rule, but revealing a spiritual rhythm. He's saying indirectly that faith only flourishes when it finds a place where it doesn't need to justify itself. The closed room isn't about isolation, it's about intimacy. It's about encountering God without measuring words, without trying to appear strong, without trying to be anything more than a child pouring out their heart before the Father. Many times, I've entered my own silence with apprehension, feeling that I didn't have the right words, that my mind was racing too fast, that my heart was too heavy. But then Jesus whispers the promise that changes everything. Your Father who sees in secret. He sees, he perceives, he knows. He doesn't measure my performance, he welcomes my presence. And as I approach him in this way, I discover that prayer has never been about convincing God of something, but about allowing him to rediscover me completely. In secret, the heart returns home. There is something profoundly therapeutic in this vision of the Father who sees where no one else sees. It's not just divine vigilance, it's care, it's presence, it's attentive love. He sees silent tears that no one notices, internal struggles that no one applauds, small acts of faithfulness that would never enter into grand speeches. He sees what even I cannot explain, and this perception dismantles within me the weight of the need to prove my worth. The truth is that much of spiritual anxiety is born precisely from this insecurity. Does God see me? But Jesus cuts this doubt at the root. The Father sees in secret. He knows the most silent movements of the soul. He knows the moment I hesitate before praying. He knows the brief sigh I make when I don't have the strength for long words. And in revealing this, Jesus is rebuilding the most essential confidence of spiritual life, that I am not alone, even when no one else knows what I am facing. And then Jesus speaks of the reward, and this creates a spiritual suspense that always impacts me. He doesn't say what the reward is. He doesn't explain the format. He doesn't describe the details. He simply states, "Your Father will reward you." And there is something extraordinary about this because he is transforming the secret into fertile ground. Everything that grows there becomes eternal. The reward is not applause, it is not recognition, it is not material conquest. It is something that only the Father can give. And precisely because it is undefined, this reward carries mystery, depth, and promise. I feel as if Jesus was saying, if you come to the secret place, there will be something that heaven will do in you, and there is not enough human language to explain it. This reward may be peace where there was torment, strength where there was fear, clarity where there was confusion, or perhaps something even deeper, an inner transformation that changes the way I see God, the world, and myself. Whatever it is real, and it is born where no one is looking. The contrast with modern anxiety is unavoidable. We live in a world where everything is exposed, shared, measured, compared. Spirituality has become content, and intimacy has become spectacle. And in this noisy scenario, Jesus calls us to silence. He is making a move opposite to that of the culture, reclaiming the space where the soul is truly healed. Because anxiety grows where everything needs to be seen, but faith grows where I can finally rest without being observed. Anxiety says you need to prove yourself. The secret says you are already loved. Anxiety says show that you are okay. The secret says bring your truth. Anxiety builds masks. The secret removes them. And the more I walk with Jesus in this direction, the more I realize that healing doesn't happen when I try to control the exterior, but when I allow myself to be transformed on the inside. There is something gentle and powerful happening here, a realignment of the soul with the Father's gaze. And at the end of this process, I realize a precious detail. Jesus doesn't lead us into secrecy to hide us from the world, but to prepare us to face it without fear. The closed room is not an escape, it is a foundation. It is the place where I drop the burdens that were never mine, where I rest from invisible battles, where my identity no longer depends on external vibrations, but on the steadfast love of the Father. And I feel that while He speaks, a silent promise is forming in the air, that those who meet with God in secret become free to live outside of it with a confidence that cannot be stolen. Something important is emerging here, something that begins to shape a new kind of freedom, one that is born within before manifesting itself outwardly. And in realizing this, I feel I'm approaching an even deeper revelation, as if God's own heart were about to open before me. Sometimes I wonder how many years of my life I spent trying to be seen by the right people, trying to prove something that perhaps even I didn't fully understand. And then I find Jesus sitting on that mountain uttering a phrase that breaks my soul in two. Your Father sees in secret. When I let those words sink in, something inside me calms down in an almost inexplicable way. It's as if He were patiently gathering all the invisible moments that I thought no one ever noticed. The small gestures, the broken prayers, the silent choices. Nothing was lost. Nothing went unwitnessed. The Father saw. The Father knows. The Father kept it. And this realization works like a gentle rumble within the soul. I no longer need to compete for attention. I no longer need to fight for recognition. I no longer need to question my worth. The Father saw before everyone else. He saw when I myself couldn't see. Imagine living in a world where the father figure was distant, busy, inaccessible, as was the reality in the first century. In that culture, a father rarely participated in the daily emotions of his children. He appeared for important decisions, but not for silent sorrows. Jesus confronts this idea with a tenderness that disarms any resistance. He says that God is not like those absent fathers, lost in public responsibilities. He is the Father who enters the dark room, who leans in to listen to the tired breathing, who perceives the trembling of a prayer that cannot even become a sentence. He sees what no one else would see because they don't consider it important. And the more I meditate on this, the more I realize that God's love is not based on grand gestures, but on small movements of the heart. He is not impressed by our performances, but is moved by our honesty. And it is there, in unassuming sincerity, that He pours healing on areas that I have hidden, even from myself. The most beautiful thing is that Jesus doesn't base this vision on merit, but on relationship. God doesn't see in secret because I am extraordinary, but because I am a child. And a child is seen, a child is perceived, a child is remembered. Spirituality based on performance transforms every action into a bargaining chip. But Jesus destroys this logic by revealing a Father who is already present even before I know what to say. His presence is not conditional, it is constant, and that changes everything. When I begin to live from this truth, I realize that my heart relaxes from old tensions, those that made me believe I needed to earn God's care. It's as if Jesus is putting my name back in the right family, a family where love doesn't need to be earned because it's already given. And when this truth settles within the soul, it even changes the way I breathe. And then comes the most confronting part. If God sees in secret, why do I still seek human approval? This question pierces me like an arrow. There's something in me that resists spiritual anonymity, as if my faith only has value when confirmed by others. But Jesus is freeing me from this emotional prison. He is teaching me that everything built in secret is unshakable. Silent faith is more solid than ostentatious religion. Hidden obedience is more valuable than any praise. Love practiced in silence has eternal weight. And realizing this, I feel a strange sensation, as if a door were opening within me, revealing a path of rest that I never knew how to access. There is a spiritual strength that is born when I stop trying to be seen, because it is there that I finally discover that I am already loved. This is the kind of freedom that no one can steal. What's most surprising is that Jesus speaks of reward, but doesn't explain what it is. This creates a mystery that remains alive through the centuries. The reward of the secret is not something I can display or quantify. It happens within me, like a realignment of the heart. It can be peace where there was fear, security where there was despair, hope where there was confusion. It can be a new sensitivity to hear God, or a courage that doesn't spring from human strength. The reward is always greater than I imagine, because it comes from a Father who is not limited to what the world considers valuable. He rewards with that which transforms my essence. And the more I accept this principle, the more I realize that my spiritual journey is not about accumulating merit, but about cultivating inner space to receive what heaven wishes to pour out. And it is at this point that Jesus begins to move the conversation into even deeper territory, a place where inner life begins to shape all choices, all affections, all longings. He is building word by word a new way of existing in the world, where the foundation is not anxiety, but trust, not the pursuit of control, but surrender to the Father's presence. And as He leads me along this path, I realize that I am entering a transformation that touches areas I didn't even know how to name. Because when I discover that the Father sees in secret, I also discover that I can live without fear. And something within me senses that there is a next level to this revelation, a truth that will begin to affect not only my prayers, but the entire way I see what I possess and what I fear losing. It always impresses me that after dismantling the entire religious structure of His time, Jesus doesn't leave a void. He creates a path. He delivers a prayer so simple that any child could repeat it, yet so profound that no theologian can exhaust its meaning. It's as if He was saying, now that you understand where to pray, I want to show you how the heart breathes before the Father. And then He pronounces words that have echoed for 2,000 years, 66 words that have opened doors for people in every age. Whenever I repeat this prayer, I feel as if I am touching the very essence of the kingdom. It's not a magic formula. It's an inner movement, a realignment of the soul. And the more I delve into the meaning of these lines, the more I realize that Jesus wasn't just teaching how to pray. He was teaching how to live. The Lord's Prayer is not a mantra, it's a map for the weary, anxious, divided heart. A map that begins with God and ends with liberation. And in the midst of it all, we discover who we truly are. The very first word sends a shiver down my spine. Our, not my Father, but our Father. Jesus is removing any possibility of individualistic faith. He doesn't allow me to approach God alone. He places me in a family even before I begin to pray. It's a healing gesture for a world marked by emotional isolation. When I say our Father, I realize I belong to something bigger, a community of people who also carry tears, struggles, and hopes. I don't enter God's presence as a loner demanding answers, but as part of a people the Father carries in His heart. And that changes how I pray, how I think, how I breathe, Because when I begin by acknowledging that He is the Father of us all, my pride dissolves, my anxiety diminishes, my sense of rejection loses its power. I don't walk alone, I don't pray alone, I don't live alone. This simple word restores my identity even before I begin my requests. But then Jesus says something even more intimate, Father. And this opens a wound and a healing within me at the same time. Because the word Father carries stories for each of us. For some, it is comfort. For others, it is absence. For me, for a long time, it was a confusing mix. And Jesus, knowing this, chooses precisely this term to redefine everything. He invites me to see God not as a distant judge, not as an impersonal cosmic force, not as an unattainable authority, but as Father. A Father who bends down, who listens, who carries, who answers. A Father who not only tolerates my weakness, but understands it. And in calling God this, I realize that prayer is not born of fear, but of relationship. It is not born of obligation, but of trust. It is not born of formalities, but of intimacy. This single term deconstructs years of attempts to prove my worth. Because if He is Father, then I am a son, and that alone redefines my entire faith. And then, in the same breath, Jesus balances this intimacy with reverence in heaven. It's as if He were saying, yes, He is Father, but not a Father limited to human failings. He is the Father who reigns over all. This combination of tenderness and majesty creates a kind of security I have never found in any human relationship. He is close enough to hear my sigh, yet powerful enough to transform entire realities. He is Father, but a Father who reigns. He is near, but not small. And when this holy tension settles in the soul, prayer gains an unexpected depth. I'm not speaking to someone who can only give me emotional comfort. I'm speaking to someone who can move heaven and earth. It is this mixture, intimacy and authority, that creates the atmosphere where true faith grows. A Father who loves me deeply, a God who reigns sovereignly, and when these two truths meet within me, my confidence is reborn. The next words, hallowed be your name, they reveal something I hadn't realized for a long time. Jesus begins the prayer by teaching me to ask for something that isn't about me. He invites me to desire that God's name be seen as holy, beautiful, righteous, true. Not because God needs recognition, but because my heart needs this restored vision. When God's name loses value, everything within me loses direction. When who God is becomes hazy, my desires become distorted, my fears increase, my choices weaken. But when His holiness shines again on my horizon, my priorities align, my soul gains focus, my life finds rhythm. This request is more than worship, it's healing. Because when the world distorts God, the soul becomes confused. But when I say, hallowed be thy name, I am asking to see God correctly and to live from that vision. And that's when something silent begins to happen, as if the heart were preparing for a profound realignment. And then Jesus moves on to the phrase that carries an entire spiritual revolution, your kingdom come. Here I stop asking for small things and begin to desire the transformation of the world. It's as if Jesus were inviting me to participate in the work that heaven is doing. When I say these words, something within me turns to a greater purpose, something that transcends my anxiety, my problems, my immediate desires. The kingdom of God is not just a place, it is a way of being, a presence that invades my fears, corrects my illusions, realigns my affections. And by asking for this kingdom, I am telling the Father that I no longer want to live according to the system that wears me down, the system of comparison, performance, accumulation, and fear. I want to live from a kingdom where love conquers hate, where peace conquers chaos, where generosity conquers greed. And while these words echo within me, I feel that I am on the verge of something even greater, as if the Father's own heart were opening to reveal what truly sustains life. Every time I say, "Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven," I feel that Jesus is inviting me to a territory where faith ceases to be theory and becomes surrender. These words carry a weight that transcends generations, an echo that seems to touch the deepest fibers of my inner resistance. Because the truth is that often my real prayer is not, "Thy will be done," but "Bless my will." And Jesus knows this. That is why he confronts me with a phrase that shifts the center of my universe. This prayer demands that I recognize something that is difficult for me to admit. God's will is better than mine, even when it seems contrary to my immediate desires. And this revelation creates within me a tension, a silent suspense, as if he were leading me to a place where I can finally trust, even without understanding. This is mature faith, not when God does what I want, but when I rest in what he wants. When I contemplate the reality of heaven, I begin to understand what Jesus is asking. In heaven, there is no resistance to God's will. There is no hesitation, no fear, no internal debate. What God desires happens. What he determines manifests. What he speaks is fulfilled. And when Jesus teaches me to pray for this dynamic to happen on earth, he is revealing that the greatest transformation does not begin in the external world, but within me. He is asking that my soul become a space where God's will is accepted with the same confidence that exists in heaven. This requires dismantling deep layers of self-sufficiency. It requires recognizing that my vision is limited, that my plans are fragile, that my desires often contradict each other. And yet, he calls me to this place of alignment, a place where peace is not born from control, but from surrender, where strength is not born from insistence, but from obedience. And it is precisely here that I perceive the most intense emotional conflict, because I want heaven, but I want to maintain my autonomy. I want God's will, as long as it doesn't violate my expectations. I want to follow Jesus, but without giving up what I consider indispensable. This internal struggle is not a sign of spiritual failure, it is a sign of humanity. Jesus knew that surrendering one's will would be the greatest challenge for his disciples. After all, he himself would face this battle in Gethsemane. "Yet not my will, but yours be done." This phrase, spoken by Jesus in the darkest hour, illuminates my own journey. He doesn't ask something of me that he hasn't experienced. He doesn't demand cold submission, but a surrender that passes through a wounded heart, through doubt, through fear. He knows exactly how much it hurts to let go, but he also knows that it is there that true freedom begins. And when I realize this, I feel the invitation become less burdensome, almost like a hug that says, "I know how much it costs. Walk with me." The most profound part of this prayer is that it doesn't just change my inner self, it changes the world. When God's will becomes the axis of my life, my choices begin to bear the mark of heaven. The way I treat people, how I use my resources, how I respond to suffering, how I deal with conflict, everything begins to transform. Not because I've become more disciplined, but because I'm being shaped by a will that is greater and wiser than my own. The kingdom begins to flourish through simple, discreet, sometimes invisible actions, and I realize that Jesus is showing me a secret. Spiritual transformation doesn't happen when I impose God's will on others, but when I allow it to transform me first. Heaven touches earth when God's will touches my heart. And when that happens, the people around me begin to feel, even if they can't explain it, that something different is emerging from my life. But this prayer also faces an obstacle: fear. Fear of what God might ask, fear of what he might remove, fear of what he might change, fear of losing the control I never truly had. And it is at this point that I realize a crucial detail: God's will never destroys me. It saves me. It is not a threat, it is protection. It is not limitation, it is liberation. Fear is born from the lie that God wants to deprive me, when in reality, He wants to heal me. And when I finally allow this truth to find space within me, I feel something change. Prayer ceases to be a painful sacrifice and becomes a profound rest, because trusting in God's will is, in essence, trusting in His heart. And if He is Father, as Jesus repeated so many times, then His will can only be good, even when it is not comfortable. This is where faith matures. This is where the soul learns to breathe. And upon reaching this point, I begin to realize that the prayer Jesus taught is not linear. It is progressive. He is preparing me, step by step, for the deeper work He desires to accomplish within me. He began by teaching me to see God as Father. Then He taught me to desire the kingdom. Now He invites me to trust in His will. It's as if He is building a spiritual foundation that sustains everything that will follow. And as this perception forms within me, I feel I am being led to an even more intimate revelation, something that touches my most basic fears, my most human needs, my most silent frailties. Because after teaching me to surrender my will, Jesus will teach me to depend on the Father day after day. Like one who guides a weary heart to a place where it is finally possible to rest without fear of tomorrow. When Jesus pronounces the words, "Give us this day our daily bread," I feel something inside me break and reorganize itself at the same time. These words carry a kind of simplicity that confronts everything I've built to protect myself. I'm used to asking for guarantees, long-term plans, security stored in emotional and financial deposits. But Jesus leads me to a place where dependence is daily, not accumulated. He is dismantling the illusion of control I've built over the years. Today's bread invites me to live today, and this touches my most anxious regions, those that always want to anticipate tomorrow. It's as if He were gently removing my fears, saying, "You only need enough for this day. The rest, leave it to me." And this phrase, so short, opens within me an unexpected space where rest begins to emerge. I realize that my difficulty isn't asking for bread, it's asking for today. I always want more than that. I want the certainty of tomorrow, the confirmation of the future, the guarantee that nothing will be lacking. But Jesus, with His firm tenderness, calls me to live a kind of life that doesn't depend on stockpiling, but on relationship. It's as if the Father were sitting with me at the table, placing only what I need for this moment while saying, "I will be here again tomorrow." This image dismantles my self-preservation mechanisms because deep down, my anxiety stems from the doubt that perhaps God won't appear tomorrow as He appeared today. But Jesus reminds me that the same Father who sustained me before will continue to sustain me afterward. Daily bread isn't about food, it's about trust. It's a spiritual school where I learn not to transform the future into an emotional prison. This prayer also exposes me in another way. It reveals my tendency to live as if everything depended on me. I've become accustomed to carrying responsibilities that were never mine, to trying to solve problems before they even arise, to anticipating scenarios where God hasn't even spoken yet. And when I say, "Give us this day our daily bread," I'm confessing that I'm not self-sufficient, something my proud heart doesn't always want to admit. It's a confession and a liberation at the same time. I admit my limitation and, at the same time, I free myself from it. Because asking for daily bread doesn't diminish me, it humanizes me. I recognize that I wasn't created to live by accumulation, but by loving dependence. And this dependence, far from shaming me, reminds me that provision is not a reward for performance, but an expression of the Father's care. There's one detail that always deeply touches me. Jesus doesn't tell me to ask for my bread, but for our bread. He takes me out of spiritual individualism and places me within a body. When I say these words, I am reminded that my prayer cannot be selfish. I don't ask only for my own sustenance, but for the sustenance of those around me, including those I cannot see. Jesus' prayer expands my heart beyond my own needs, allowing me to feel the pain and hunger of others. It's as if he were saying, "You don't exist alone, you belong to a family." And when this awareness awakens, I realize that part of the bread that God places in my hands can be destined for others. Daily bread becomes a mission. It's not just for me, it's for us. And this truth reminds me that generosity is not born from excess, but from the confidence that there will be bread again tomorrow. Asking for daily bread also confronts my anxiety about the future in a way that becomes uncomfortable. When I pray like this, I'm invited to let go of tomorrow, something my mind rarely wants to do. I carry imaginary scenarios, anticipated worries, assumptions that turn into internal storms. And Jesus, calmly, guides me back to the present. He doesn't ask me to ignore the future, but not to live in it before its time. Daily bread is a constant invitation to the now. It's a reminder that the step I need to take is today's, not later's. And when I begin to live this way, I realize that an invisible weight gradually dissolves. My breathing becomes deeper, my heart slows down. My body understands that it doesn't need to fight a war that hasn't even begun. Jesus is teaching me to live a kind of life where grace comes in the exact measure, at the exact moment, for the exact need. And as this revelation deepens, I begin to realize that all of Jesus' teaching about daily bread is preparing the ground for something even more sensitive. He will speak about the deepest hunger of humankind, the hunger for forgiveness. Just as I need bread for my body, I need forgiveness for my soul. And prayer will lead me to this area where my greatest need is not something material, but something that corrodes the heart from within. I realize that Jesus is building a movement, from the physical to the spiritual, from the external to the internal, from what sustains the body to what sustains communion. I am about to enter a part of prayer where I not only receive something from God, but I also need to give something. And this movement reveals that today's bread is not the only food the soul needs to live. When Jesus says, "Forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors," I feel as if he is opening a drawer within me that I have tried to keep closed for years. This part of the prayer doesn't deal with what is lacking in my body, but with what weighs on my spirit. It is here that he exposes not only my failings before God, but also how I hold on to grudges that distort my capacity to love. And as I repeat these words, I realize how much my heart needs this kind of cleansing. I carry debts I have never confessed, wounds I have tried to normalize, resentments I have hidden even from myself. The prayer becomes a mirror where I see not only my needs, but my inner knots. And Jesus, with almost surgical precision, is about to undo each one of them. This line reveals something I usually avoid: the awareness that I owe things I will never be able to repay. These aren't financial debts, but moral, spiritual, emotional ones. Every time I failed to love, every time I reacted harshly, every time my pride spoke louder than my character, I created debts. And when Jesus teaches me to ask for forgiveness, I realize the depth of this restoration. It's not just an apology, but a liberation, a release from a weight I can no longer carry. Forgiving my own debts requires courage, because it means admitting that I am not the idealized version of myself. But it also requires trust, because it means believing that the Father isn't waiting for me to perfect myself to forgive me. He sees me as I am, and even so, extends grace. It is here that the soul finds the relief it has so long sought. But the most uncomfortable part of this prayer is the second, as we forgive. Jesus connects the forgiveness I receive to the forgiveness I offer, and that changes everything. I wish they were two separate things. I wish I could ask God for forgiveness without having to deal with the person who hurt me. But Jesus ties the two ends together, as if to say, there is no vertical forgiveness without horizontal forgiveness. And this principle touches my deepest wounds. Because forgiving isn't easy, it's not automatic, it's not natural. Sometimes it's painful even to think about the person. And yet, Jesus insists, the healing you receive from heaven must flow to earth. The grace that the Father pours out on you must touch those who were part of your pain. And when I realize that He is calling me to this path, I feel both resistance and hope. Because the forgiveness He demands is the same forgiveness He empowers. The truth is, when I don't forgive, something inside me slowly begins to die. Resentment takes root, occupying emotional, spiritual, and even physical space. I begin to carry a weight that wasn't meant to be on my shoulders. Bitterness becomes a lens, distorting how I see everything, people, relationships, even God. The forgiveness Jesus proposes isn't about absolving pain, it's about preventing it from consuming me. He knows that forgiveness is a process, not a feeling. It's a decision I need to make, even while my emotions try to pull me back. And as I pray this phrase, I realize that the Father isn't asking me to minimize real wounds, but to surrender them to be healed. He's saying, I don't want you to carry this alone. Liberation begins when I recognize this, and at the same time I realize that the forgiveness I offer is, in a way, a demonstration that I have understood the grace I have received. When I remember all that God has forgiven me, when I realize the times He has restored me despite my failings, something begins to break within my emotional rigidity. It's as if He were saying, let the grace that has reached you reach others. It's not about deserving. No one deserves forgiveness. It's about freedom. And when I begin to release those who owe me something, I realize that the one being freed first is me. Forgiveness opens a door I didn't even know was closed. It reconnects me with the Father, with myself, and with others. And each step in that direction brings light back to places where darkness had settled. And it is precisely at this point of vulnerability, where I recognize my fragility and extend mercy, that Jesus prepares me for the next request. Because after dealing with the past, He will lead me to the present, to that which can still bring me down. He will speak about temptation, about my weak areas, about the danger I don't see coming. I realize that the path of prayer has deepened. First, I reconcile my relationship with God. Then I reconcile my relationship with others. And now, He will teach me to deal with the battle within me. This movement reveals that Jesus is not only teaching me to pray, He is teaching me to live fully. And I am about to enter the most honest part of this journey. When Jesus teaches me to pray and lead us not into temptation, I feel something inside me tremble, as if He were touching an area of my life that I prefer to keep hidden. These words reveal my vulnerability in a way that is both painful and liberating at the same time. It's as if Jesus was saying, admit that you are not as strong as you think, and this admission exposes me. Because deep down, there's a part of me that wants to believe I can face anything, that I'm mature enough, that nothing can bring me down. But Jesus knows that temptation is not a test of strength, it's a reminder of my fragility. When I pray this, I acknowledge that there are paths that seduce me, and that if I enter them alone, I will fall. It's not weakness to admit this, it's wisdom, it's humility, it's the truth finally finding its voice. The most surprising thing is that this prayer doesn't assume God wants to test me. On the contrary, it reveals that He wants to preserve me. Temptation isn't about God trying to bring me down. It's about my own inclination leading me to places where I can't stand. And Jesus teaches me to ask not to be led to the limit of my resistance. This awareness is uncomfortable because it requires me to confront my blind spots, those areas I pretend to have overcome, but which still have power over me. Temptation always starts small, almost imperceptible, a thought, a desire, a justification, a subtle deviation. And before I know it, I'm more involved than I'd like to admit. When I pray not to be led to these places, I'm asking God to set limits where I would lose control. I'm asking Him to protect me, even from myself. There is a profound relief when I recognize that I don't need to be invincible. Culture says I must be strong, disciplined, resilient. But Jesus invites me to a kind of sincerity that dismantles that pressure. He wants me to recognize that there are situations that exceed my emotional, spiritual, and psychological capacity. And that doesn't make me unworthy, it makes me human. Praying not to be led into temptation is admitting that without God's grace, I am susceptible to what destroys me. And at the same time, it is understanding that God is not irritated by my weakness. He draws near to it. He places His hand on my shoulder and guides me along paths where my vulnerability does not turn into ruin. This prayer is a request for direction, for care, for a safe route. It's like saying, "Father, walk ahead of me. I can't see well enough." But Jesus doesn't stop at temptation. He goes further, "But deliver us from the evil one." These words open a curtain that I'm reluctant to pull back. They reveal that my struggles are not merely psychological or emotional, they are spiritual. There is a real, active, intentional enemy who knows my weaknesses and tries to exploit each one of them. And when I recognize this, I realize that I cannot live the Christian life as if it were only about good decisions. There is a battle that I did not choose, but in which I am involved, and Jesus teaches me to pray not to face evil alone, but to be delivered from it. He does not call me to fight with my own weapons, but to depend on the Father who sees what I do not see. This prayer is a cry of trust. Deliver me from that which is greater than me, but not greater than you. This spiritual reality could generate fear, but Jesus transforms it into hope. He doesn't emphasize the power of the enemy, he emphasizes the power of liberation. The focus is not on evil, but on the God who delivers me from it. The Father not only takes me out of the path of danger, he rescues me when I am already trapped in it. He not only prevents me from falling, he lifts me up when I fall. That is the beauty of this prayer. It acknowledges my inadequacy without diminishing God's capacity. And the more I repeat these words, the more I realize that I am not alone at any level of my struggle. The Father is present when the attack is invisible. He is near when my mind is confused. He is attentive when my soul is exhausted. He is the one who fights for me, within me and around me. And as I conclude this part of the prayer, I realize that Jesus is about to shift the focus from internal and spiritual battles to the anxiety that dominates daily life. Prayer deals with the spirit, but life deals with the day-to-day, food, clothing, tomorrow, the future. Jesus is going to take everything he has taught me so far and apply it to my most practical concerns. It's as if he were saying, "Now that you understand who God is and how he cares for you, let's talk about what steals your peace the most." And I feel I'm about to enter the most sensitive part of Jesus' message, where he not only reveals my weaknesses, but invites me to live without fear of them. When Jesus begins to say, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life," I feel as if he is holding up a mirror to me, not to accuse me, but to reveal what imprisons me. Anxiety is so intertwined with my way of functioning that sometimes I no longer understand where it ends and where it begins. And suddenly, Jesus leans over my heart and says, "Stop carrying tomorrow." These words have a gentle yet devastating force. He is not talking about occasional worry. He is talking about the kind of anxiety that seeps into thoughts, steals sleep, tightens the chest, and projects invisible tragic scenarios. And as he speaks, I realize that my soul is trapped in an imaginary future that does not yet exist, and perhaps never will. Jesus is not asking me to be irresponsible, but to be free. And this freedom is frightening because it compels me to trust. The most profound question is when he asks, is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? This question opens a fissure within me. I've spent so much time trying to control details, trying to ensure security through effort, trying to manipulate circumstances to avoid pain, that I've lost sight of what's essential. Life isn't an emotional management project. It's a relationship with the Father. Jesus isn't diminishing my needs. He's expanding my perspective. It's as if he's saying, you're fighting for small things while I want to give you something big. Life is bigger than my goals, my fears, my protective strategies. And when I let that reality in, I realize how much I've lived reduced, limited by worries that occupy a space that never belonged to them. Anxiety shrinks my world. Jesus expands it. And then he points to the birds. I've always found it impressive how Jesus uses something so common to reveal something so profound. Birds don't plant, don't harvest, don't accumulate, don't have accounts, don't have deposits, don't have contingency plans, and yet they are fed. When I observe this carefully, I realize that Jesus' point is not that I should live without responsibility, but that I should live without despair. Responsibility organizes my life, anxiety devours it. And Jesus, with this simple image, confronts my internal logic. If God cares for soulless beings, how could he not care for me, who bear his image? This comparison should be obvious, but within me it becomes a revelation. The problem was never the lack of provision, it was the lack of trust. I always feared that God would arrive late one day, but Jesus reminds me he has never failed. It is I who have failed to remember. After that, he touches on the futility of worry. Can any one of you by worrying add a single hour to your life? This question dismantles me, not only because the answer is obvious, but because it exposes the absurdity of the way I have been living. I worry as if anxiety were a form of control, as if fear were a kind of emotional insurance, as if anticipating problems gave me some kind of advantage. But worry doesn't change anything about the future. It only destroys the present. It doesn't solve, it doesn't prevent, it doesn't heal. It only wears you down. It only tires you. It only corrodes you. And when I realize this, I feel a mixture of sadness and liberation. I spent years giving my energy to something that never gave me anything back. It's as if Jesus were opening the window of a room where I lived locked up. And now light comes in, and now air comes in, and now I realize I can go out. When he speaks of flowers, something inside me melts. Flowers don't produce their own beauty, they simply receive. They receive light, they receive water, they receive care, and yet they surpass in beauty the robes of the richest king in history. Jesus is showing me that value doesn't come from effort, but from the Father's care. Flowers don't strive to be beautiful, they simply exist. And that existence is enough for God to cover them with glory. And then he looks at me, and looks at my story, my fear, my weariness, my self-protection, and says, "You are worth more than they are." This phrase disconcerts me. Deep down, my anxiety is a way of believing that I am less valuable than Jesus affirms. It's a doubt about my worth, about God's care, about the future he wants to build with me. And when this truth reaches me, I feel something tight inside me begin to loosen. But it's the final phrase of this section that truly confronts me. You of little faith. He doesn't say this to humiliate me, but to show me the origin of my anxiety. It's not a lack of ability. It's not a lack of emotional control. It's not psychological weakness. It's a wounded faith. A faith that has seen difficult things and concluded that God might not intervene. A tired faith, a bruised faith. And Jesus, with this phrase, doesn't condemn me. He invites me to heal. It's as if he were saying to me, I know where you stumbled. I know where your fear comes from. I know why you try to control everything. But it's time to rest in what the Father feels for you. And I realize, with painful and beautiful clarity, that I am about to enter the most transformative part of this discourse, where Jesus not only reveals the problem of anxiety, but delivers the antidote that can change my way of life forever. When Jesus says that it is the pagans who run after food, drink, and clothing, something inside me becomes restless. It's as if he were showing me that much of what I consider normal, this endless race, this desperate attempt to secure the future, this camouflaged fear of not having enough, doesn't actually fit with someone who knows the Father. And suddenly, I realize that my anxiety isn't just an emotional problem. It's a lifestyle I've absorbed from the world around me without realizing it. The world runs, so I run. The world fears, so I fear too. The world lives as if God were distant or distracted, and I, unintentionally, have copied that rhythm. Jesus is inviting me to slow down, not because life has become easier, but because he is reminding me of who walks with me. When Jesus says, "Your heavenly Father knows that you need them," I feel as if those words are aimed directly at the root of my fear. My problem was never a lack of needs. My problem was always the feeling that God might not be paying attention to them. I knew he could provide, but I doubted whether he truly saw what I was facing, as if I were just another lost face in a crowd of billions. But here, Jesus affirms that the Father knows, not generically, not superficially, but profoundly. He knows the bill that's due tomorrow. He knows the pantry that's empty. He knows the pressure in my chest. He knows what I've lost. He knows what I've tried. He knows what I fear. And when that truth sinks in, something changes. Suddenly, anxiety loses some of its hold on me, because I begin to realize that I'm not living unnoticed. I've always found it curious that Jesus says, "The pagans run after all these things." It's not just that they desire these things, they run after them. It's movement, it's haste, it's desperation, and the more I think about it, the more I realize that anxiety always pushes me to run to prove myself, to run to protect myself, to run not to lose, to run to guarantee results. But Jesus is calling me to a kind of life where I am not driven by lack, but by the Father. It's a complete change of motivation. The pagans run because they don't know God. I run because I've forgotten to know him. And now Jesus invites me to stop, breathe, look up and remember, you have a Father. That changes everything. And when I allow that to touch my heart, I feel as if for the first time I can walk without that constant weight of urgency. I realize that deep down, anxiety is the result of trying to live as a spiritual orphan. It's acting as if I have to defend my own existence. It's believing that everything depends only on me, that if I don't run, everything will crumble. And when Jesus speaks of the Father, he dismantles my inner orphanhood. He reminds me that I wasn't left alone in the world. There is someone who carries what I tried to carry. There is someone who sees where I stumble and where I wear myself out. There is someone who not only knows my needs, but feels them with me. Anxiety is born where the awareness of fatherhood dies, and Jesus, with few words, rekindles that awareness within me. He restores the memory that I belong to someone who cares for me personally and constantly. And when that truth finally sinks in, I begin to realize something even deeper. Perhaps I'm not fighting anxiety with just emotional strength, but with distorted beliefs about God. Perhaps my anxiety isn't just fear of the future, but a silent doubt about the Father's character, And as I think about this, I feel Jesus looking at me with the same tenderness with which he looked at the disciples in the Sermon on the Mount, as if to say, I know why you're afraid, but I also know you don't need to carry this burden. Anxiety feeds on small images of God. And Jesus, like a careful artist, is redesigning the image of the Father within me, bigger, more present, more attentive, more loving than I ever understood. Then I realized that Jesus is preparing the ground for an even greater revelation. He's not just taking anxiety out of my hands. He's offering me a new way of living. He's about to reveal the secret rhythm of those who trust, the gravitational center where all my worries find rest. And I feel that the next step he will take will not only confront my anxiety, it will replace it. I feel I'm one step away from something that could redefine my focus, my effort, and my priorities. As if Jesus were saying, now that you understand what you must seek, I'll show you what you should seek first, and that will change everything. Look, when Jesus finally says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, I feel as if he has spent the entire time preparing my heart to hear this phrase without resisting it. It's as if all the previous deconstructions, the stage of religion, the false security of money, the illusion of control, the pressure of survival, existed to make room for this truth. And when these words arrive, they don't sound like a rigid commandment, but like an invitation to breathe. Jesus is offering me a center, a focus, a direction that finally aligns everything within me. For the first time, I realize that my anxiety isn't a lack of organization, it's a lack of direction. I've been running in so many different directions that I've forgotten there's only one safe path to follow, and now Jesus points to it. What strikes me most is the word first. He's not saying to seek the kingdom as a part of life, but as the point of reference for all parts. Seeking him first doesn't mean putting God at the top of the list. It means making God the entire list. It's about allowing his will to determine my pace, my choices, my relationships, my work, my habits, my dreams. And however simple it may seem, I realize that I always sought other things first and tried to fit God into what was left over. I sought security first. I sought approval first. I sought comfort first. I sought control first. And then I asked God to bless everything I had already decided on my own. But now Jesus is reversing that order. He is saying that life only works when the center is in the right place. And when he mentions his righteousness, I realize it's not just about what God wants to do in the world, but what he wants to do within me. Seeking God's righteousness is desiring that my character reflect his character. It's wanting my life to show his priorities. It's allowing the Spirit to adjust what is misaligned, heal what is broken, uproot what is toxic. And at the same time, it's understanding that the righteousness he asks for is the righteousness he himself produces. I don't achieve this by force, I achieve it through surrender. The more I want to be righteous, the more I realize I need the grace that only Jesus offers. Seeking the kingdom is direction. Seeking righteousness is transformation. And both happen in the same movement, looking to the Father and walking. But it's the promise that comes after that truly disarms me, and all these things will be given to you as well. It's as if Jesus were saying, stop trying to secure for yourself what I have already decided to provide. All the things I wore myself out over, food, clothing, future, stability, emotional security, are not conquered by my fear, but delivered by God's care. What I spent my life trying to control was precisely what God wanted me to receive in rest. And for the first time, I realized that seeking the kingdom first is not losing anything, it's finally stopping losing. All the areas where I felt lacking were areas where the kingdom wasn't first. And now I understand, when the kingdom comes first, nothing is left out. This promise also reveals something I had never realized. God isn't asking me to ignore my needs. He's asking me to stop making them my God. When they are my center, I become a slave to them. When the kingdom is my center, they find a healthy place to exist. God not only knows my needs, He has already planned to meet them. My anxiety always believed that God could do it, but perhaps didn't want to. This promise destroys that lie. The Father wants to provide. He delights in providing. He is committed to providing. And as these words sink in, I feel as if a gentle breeze is passing through the tightest part of my chest. For the first time in a long time, I begin to believe I can rest. And then I realize that Jesus isn't finished yet. He's about to touch on the last point, the one that has held me back forever, the fear of tomorrow. He dismantled my priorities, reorganized my focus, exposed my fears, showed me who the Father is. Now He wants to talk about the future, that place where my mind lives, but where my body has never arrived. A watershed moment. As if Jesus was saying, now that you know where to look, I'm going to teach you to live one day at a time. And for the first time, I'm ready to listen. When Jesus finally says, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, I feel as if He is placing His hand directly on the deepest wound of my soul. Because, although I worry about many things, it is always tomorrow that paralyzes me. Tomorrow is where my fears grow, where my assumptions worsen, where my imaginary scenarios take on a life of their own. And Jesus, in mentioning tomorrow, reveals that He knows exactly where my thoughts wander when I lose control of the present. He is not talking about a theoretical fear, but about the early mornings when I lie in the dark and my mind begins to create problems that don't even exist yet. He is targeting the exact point where my faith begins to crumble, and at the same time, He is offering a way back. The following phrase strikes me like an accurate diagnosis. For tomorrow will worry about itself. I never thought of tomorrow as something with its own weight. I always thought my worry helped balance the future, as if my fear could serve as preparation. But Jesus reveals that tomorrow already carries its own weight, its own burden, its own complexity. By trying to carry today what belongs to tomorrow, I become crushed by a responsibility that shouldn't be mine. Tomorrow is not my territory. Tomorrow is not my work. Tomorrow is not my domain. And when I try to enter it before its time, I suffer in anticipation of problems that God hasn't even placed in my path yet. Jesus is clearly telling me, stop living in a day that I haven't yet given you. And B, when He declares, each day has enough trouble of its own, I feel He is dismantling my last illusion of control. Because the truth is, I've always tried to protect myself by planning every possible scenario. I've always believed that if I could foresee, I could avoid. But Jesus is teaching me that the problem isn't planning, it's the anxiety that tries to replace trust. Life truly has challenges, and He never denied that. But these challenges were distributed day by day, not all at once. When I carry the weight of several days at once, it's not the world that becomes too heavy. It's me who drifts away from the rhythm God established. He gave me grace for today, not for tomorrow. And when I try to live outside that rhythm, my heart becomes a place of storm. It's strange to realize how much time I spent suffering over futures that never happened, how many tears I shed for fears that never became reality. How many nights I lost imagining problems that God would never allow to materialize. My heart became a factory of scenarios, some so dark they seemed prophetic, but in the end they were just projections of my lack of rest in the Father. Jesus is calling me to stop this internal production of anticipated tragedies. He is teaching me to live where my feet truly are, and not where my mind insists on wandering. Tomorrow is limitless in my imagination, but small and precise in God's hands. And when this awareness enters, I feel my body relax in a way I haven't experienced in a long time. I realize something profound. Every time I imagined the worst, I wasn't just fearing the future. I was distrusting God. Anxiety isn't just fear of what might happen. It's doubt about who will be with me when it happens. And Jesus, with these words, is calling me to a kind of trust that doesn't depend on the absence of danger, but on the presence of the Father. He's asking me to believe that whatever happens tomorrow, He will be there before me, preparing the way, holding my hand, sustaining my heart. He's telling me to step down from the commander's chair of the universe and return to the place of a child. Tomorrow may be frightening, but it is not greater than He who already lives beyond it. And when I let all of this catch up with me, I realize that this is the perfect conclusion to Matthew 6. It began by exposing my desire to be seen, dismantled my tendency toward performance, taught me to pray, challenged my priorities, confronted my relationship with money, revealed my anxieties, pointed to God's fatherhood. And now it gives me back the gift. The place where grace truly resides, the place where the Father meets me, the place where my soul can breathe. Jesus is calling me to live one day at a time, not because tomorrow isn't important, but because it's already in the Father's hands. And for the first time, I feel I can say, tomorrow doesn't belong to me. And that's finally good news. When I reach the end of Matthew 6, I realize that I haven't just read a chapter of the Bible. I've gone through a process of reconstruction. Each phrase of Jesus was like a sledgehammer striking internal structures that I thought were normal, but which were actually imprisoning me. He ripped away my desire to show off, dismantled my religious justifications, revealed my hidden motivations. And at the same time, He placed before me a life that doesn't depend on masks, performance, or applause. When I look back, I feel as if I've walked a narrow path where Jesus, patiently, lifted weight after weight from my shoulders. And now, at the end, I realize I am lighter than when I began. What's most striking is realizing that Jesus wasn't just correcting my behavior, He was freeing my heart. He didn't want a prettier prayer. He wanted a true prayer. He didn't want a more sophisticated fast. He wanted an invisible fast. He didn't want a noisier generosity. He wanted a generosity that only the Father sees. Each of His instructions plucked the eyes of the people around me and fixed them directly on God. It's as if Jesus spent the entire chapter repeating a single refrain. The Father sees you. And the more I meditated on this, the more I realized that the root of my anxiety, my search for recognition, and my need for control was, in fact, an inability to believe that the Father truly sees me. And then I realized that the teaching about the Father who sees in secret is not just a correction of hypocrisy, it's an invitation to intimacy. Jesus calls me to a place where I don't need to be strong, beautiful, eloquent, admired, or successful. He calls me to the Father's presence, where truth is welcome and performance dies. When I pray in secret, I discover who I am without an audience. When I give without announcing it, I am guided by love, not by approval. When I fast in silence, my hunger is for God, not for human respect. The secret place is not darkness, it is freedom. The secret place is where I stop being a character and become a child again. As I journey through this chapter, I also realize that Jesus has freed me from another silent tyrant, money. For the first time, I understand why He said I cannot serve two masters. It's not a threat, it's a description of reality. I tried to serve God while maintaining my security in money. I tried to seek the kingdom while trying to secure my future with my own hands. I tried to balance two centers, two rhythms, two gods. But in the end, only one of them possessed me. Jesus isn't taking away my security. He's showing me that I never had it in the things I tried to protect. He's not asking me to be reckless. He's asking me to be free, and that freedom both frightens and attracts me at the same time. And when he speaks about anxiety, I feel he's not rebuking me, he's understanding me. He sees my fears, my attempts to avoid pain, my sleepless nights pretending to be in control. And his response isn't, "Be stronger," it's, "Trust the Father more." Anxiety was my way of living without fatherhood. It was my way of believing that if I didn't take care of myself, no one would. But Jesus restores my trust in God in a way that no philosophical or theological explanation could. He doesn't give me a strategy to control the future. He gives me back the Father of the future. He doesn't diminish my needs. He reminds me that I have someone who knows them before I do. And this revelation, so simple, begins to disarm years of accumulated tension. And looking at the last sentence, "Each day has enough trouble of its own," I realize that Jesus isn't describing an easy life, but a possible life. A life lived at the pace of grace, one day at a time. A life where I don't rush towards tomorrow, I'm not stuck in yesterday, and finally I inhabit the only place where God finds me, the present. I feel that Matthew 6 ends like a door opening, not like a chapter closing. An invitation to walk through the rest of my life with less fear, fewer masks, less anxiety, and more trust in the Father who saw every step of my way. And now, after going through all this, I realize that I didn't just read Matthew 6, I was transformed by it. When I finish Matthew 6, I feel as if I've emerged from a place where God whispers truths I wouldn't have the courage to hear aloud. It's as if Jesus took my hand and slowly led me out of everything I believed life to be and showed me in silence what it truly means to live. I realize now that spirituality doesn't happen on stages, but in locked rooms. It doesn't flourish in noise, but in secrecy. It's not born from performance, but from truth. And in that secrecy, where no one sees me, I discover that the Father has always seen. Each word of Jesus untied a knot within me. He freed me from the need to be admired, from the anxiety that corrodes the present, from the burden of accumulating what cannot accompany me after death. He adjusted my focus, repositioned my faith, healed my motivations, and when he touched on tomorrow, he also touched the most fragile place in my soul and chose not to shame me, but to relieve me. He returned me to today, to the now, to the only space where heaven meets earth. And here I realized that Jesus wasn't just teaching, he was calling me back to simplicity, to trust, to rest, back to the Father. Matthew 6 is not just a text, it's a silent revolution that begins from within, and when it ends, I am no longer the same. If Matthew 6 spoke to you as it spoke to me, share this video with someone who is carrying too much weight. There are people struggling alone with anxieties that Jesus has already offered to replace with rest. This could be the word that sets someone you love free. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join me for the next chapter. Together, we'll explore every word Jesus spoke that day, every truth that still transforms lives 2,000 years later, because what he began in Matthew 6, he wants to complete in you.